Welcome to the third session at Outcomes Uni today, this one about branded communications. My name is Sacha Cody, and for the next 30 minutes, I'm going to be taking you under the hood of the Optus program and our branded communications program at Forethought. So yesterday we heard from Melissa Hopkins, and she shared the vision and strategy and the brand strategy at Optus. And just now we heard Michael Sinclair talk about measures for success. In the next 30 minutes, we're going to get under the hood of the program. And if I can start with the end in mind, even though we're talking about advertising, we're not just talking about an ad. We're talking about the expression and the amplification of a brand strategy through the communications function. Today, there's four things that I'll take us through. The first is a look under the hood of the program itself. What it was, how it worked, and the various baton changes along the way to avoid common pitfalls we see in these kinds of programs that we've learnt over the years. We're going to briefly look at an advertising impact framework and square a circle, if you like, between how people think about advertising and our philosophy and approach at Forethought, which is around the triple play. Specifically, if advertising is meant to be single-minded, how do we do three things at once? And that leads us into a deep dive into one of these topics, and that is around understanding emotion and how to detonate the right emotion, the driver emotion in our communications. And finally, we'll talk about what happens after we launch and how we use decision support tools and commercial information to understand, is this delivering not just the right brand outcome, but the right commercial outcome for the organization? So that's our goal today. And again, just to leave you with the end in mind, it's not just an ad, it's about the expression and amplification of the brand strategy. So why do we have a racetrack here? What does the racetrack all mean? The racetrack is a symbol of the program in itself. And as many of you may know, Optus are sponsors of the Australian Olympic team, and 2020 was to be an Olympic year. So the racetrack was very apt. It lends itself to lane changes and baton changes. And to make it simple to start with, the program was as such. Firstly, what to say? What are the drivers of choice that Optus will focus on as they pivot their organization and into a new brand strategy and a brand refresh? Secondly, and Rachel touched on this in the last session, the freedom of a tight brief. How do we use what we learn about drivers of choice to create a brief that is so tight, it gives absolute freedom to the agency to deliver on? Thirdly, how to say, and this is often the core, the primary focus of advertising. How do we say it? But you can see here it's situated in a much more broad framework. And this is advertising itself. Do we get cut through? Do we get our message across? Are we linked to our brand? And so on. And finally, the outcome. It doesn't just stop once a campaign is launched, but working very closely with Optus and all our clients to optimize in market with brand and commercial outcomes. So this is the broad framework that we took with Optus and with many of our clients. And now I just want to deep dive into these steps a little bit more one by one, really to show you the combination of research, advisory, and collaboration that we bring to our clients at Forethought. So let me start with the first horizon, if you like. What do customers want to hear? Which is about the choice, deciding what to say. So what we did for Optus, as we do for many of our clients, including Bendigo Bank, who we heard from this morning, is a program of work using prophecy, thoughts, and feelings to understand What are the rational and emotional drivers of choice in the market? This is really important. It allows us to develop what we call the triple play, which we heard Mel talk about yesterday. What's the emotion, the quality, and the price message that we will own in our communications and across the organisation moving ahead? This is not just about research, although research is a core part of it. We stop and think with our clients and review all the evidence, not in presentations, but in very collaborative workshops, sometimes for half a day, synthesizing the evidence and really creating alignment, ownership, and comprehension across all the stakeholders in the business. We gain endorsement of the brand strategy and the triple play at the end. And I show this photo here because with Optus, as with many of our clients, we work with the senior team to generate this alignment, ownership, and comprehension. So in this photo, we can see the CEO of Optus, Kelly Bayer Rosemarin. Mel Hopkins is there, Michael Sinclair is there, both guests of ours this week, as well as other partners of theirs, their creative partners and their media partners as well. Here we have the first baton change, because one of the key outcomes of this we heard about from Michael Sinclair just now, which is a creative brief. And the process of making this creative brief in this program with Optus was collaborative. Forethought was instrumental in translating some of the critical insights into language that went into that creative brief. Once that baton change occurred, Optus set out to find a new agency to bring their brand strategy to life. And in this case, as you may know, a special group, an agency in New Zealand, was appointed. How were they appointed? It was through a panel and various selection criteria, of which Forethought was a part of. Forethought was involved to provide our perspective on the comprehension, if you like, from the brief that the agency demonstrated in their pitch. So once an agency was selected by Optus, a special group, we go to the second baton change, which is now generating ideas and expressions or ads to bring the strategy to life. And here is where we went on a journey of both advisory and research, covering script discussions, unfinished film research, and finished film research to arrive at a set of 3 advertisements that Optus were ready to launch into the market. We're going to watch one of these ads shortly, and I'm going to ask you to pay attention to a couple of things in the ad, which I'll highlight shortly. Having done everything we can to get these expressions ready for the market, we launch. But it doesn't stop there. Traditionally, in-market programs look at KPIs, and just earlier, Michael spoke really clearly about both short-term and long-term KPIs and metrics that are important. And we do that with Optus and with our clients. But we go beyond that. We look at simulations and financial outcomes in terms of launching this ad. Will it have the brand and commercial outcomes we seek? And secondly, once in market, if there are optimization opportunities with these commercials, is it worth it? If we spend more money changing the ads to make them better, is it going to give us bang for our buck? And so a key part of our program was in-market optimization as well from a commercial perspective. It doesn't stop there either. You can see that this is a racetrack, and we go around and around at a pace that suits our clients' business and how the industry changes. COVID has had a huge effect. And as we spoke about yesterday, 5G is now much more topical than it was a year ago. And so again, we keep revisiting this racetrack. We keep revisiting the triple play to ensure it's infused with the latest evidence so that Optus can act on it as powerfully as they can. So that's the program, if you like, in a nutshell. And you can see it's really a combination of research, collaboration, and advisory with Optus and with all our clients. It all starts with brand choice drivers and the triple play, which is what to say, what drives choice in the market. And I raised this because there's a bit of a conundrum I wanted to address in this session, which is many people talk about advertising research through metrics like cut-through and brand linkage and single-minded messaging. As we heard yesterday, the brand funnel, the marketing funnel is dead. People enter the funnel at all kinds of moments in their life. It's being called the messy middle even now. And so at Forethought, we strongly advocate that we need to have all these messages in all our communications all the time, equality, price, and emotion in every piece of communication. They vary in weight from one to the other, but they all need to be there. So how do we square this circle if advertising is meant to be single-minded, but brand strategy today must do all things at once? How does that work? So just very briefly, I just wanted to share the framework that we've used with Optus and other clients and how we bring these things together. So advertising does need cut through and it does need brand linkage. This is without a doubt important for effective advertising. Cut through the clutter and linked to your brand. Create branded memories that get drawn upon later for business outcomes, for effectiveness. And for effectiveness, we need to be on message that drives our outcomes. Triple play, and as we heard from Michael, both long-term and short-term outcomes. Where does the triple play fit in all of this? And how do we do three things all the time? Pardon me. Well, very simply, on message is about teaching them that, the quality and price messages. Emotion helps with cut through. It helps with generating memories through peripheral vision, those things that happen when we're not really paying attention, but advertising still has a really powerful impression upon us. The key thing about this is that not all three things are explicit. Just because McDonald's says, I'm loving it, doesn't mean that customers love McDonald's. And this is the key. Very often, we talk about the quality message, the quality driver as the key explicit thing you talk about. But we talk about price and emotion as implicit. Yesterday, we heard about price brand from Mel Hopkins. Price brand are the non-price cues that we use in advertising to communicate the price competitive positioning that we want. As an example, petrol stations often will always have their price of petrol in billboards all around. They have war rooms set up on site, monitoring the price of petrol all around the city. But did you know that the price they advertise the ice and the price of wood has as much and sometimes a bigger impact on price perceptions than the actual price of petrol itself? That's what we mean by price brand. When we watch the Optus ad shortly, I'm not going to tell you what they are, but I encourage you to take a look and see and think, what price brand elements can you see in this ad? This was a big piece of collaborative work that we did with Optus on this program, the price brand, embedding it in the advertising. What I wanted to talk about, though, and just deep dive, is the topic of emotion and implicitly having an ad that detonates an emotion that drives choice. There are 9 emotions that drive decision-making behavior, and they're all different. Surprise, for example, is a short-lived emotion. It's the difference between expectation and reality. Happiness, on the other hand, is also a positive emotion, but it's this feeling of control and certainty. We heard yesterday again from Mel that pride is the emotion that Optus wants to own. Pride is about being socially valued or being personally responsible for a socially valued outcome. This is the basic definition. But there are many ways of talking about pride. There are many territories of pride, if you like, at a very simple level, individual or collective. Am I helping myself or am I helping others? So when it came to, when it came to the advertising, how do we not just detonate pride, but how do we detonate the right territory of pride for our category and for our consumer? So I've masked the information here, but one of the key things that we did working with Optus was understanding all the expressions of pride and what they mean for their business and aligning on the right territory to go for in their advertising. This process was not just about working with Optus either. And I should have said earlier that we had a close working relationship with their agency as well, going through the research, discussing scripts, discussing storyboards, and so on. So I've spoken to you about the journey overall. I've spoken to you about how we square that circle between typical advertising metrics and the triple play philosophy and the power of that. And I've just done a bit of a deep dive into how we worked on one of these topics, bringing emotion into advertising. What I'd like to do now is to play the ad for you, the 60-second version, which you've probably seen in market. And I'm not going to tell you any of the answers, but I just encourage you to think about what's the emotion and what's the price brands, the non-price cues that you might see here as you watch. So thank you, Brittany, if you could please play the advert.
So in the kitchen there can be blue.
Thanks, Brittany. What a great ad. So I'm not going to give away any secrets, but I hope you could see some of the work that Optus and Special Group did, particularly around price brand and particularly around emotion and that feeling of something valued in society. All right. After the ad is launched, and the final thing I wanted to share before I get to some Q&A, and I can see some questions in the box already, is that it doesn't stop there. For many of our clients, like Optus, we did the first piece of work, what to say. So we know the drivers of choice. We don't always know that, but when we do, we use simulations and a decision support tool to help us do a couple of things. The first thing that we can do is try launch the advert. Is this a mass market advert? Is this an advert maybe more powerful with a particular cohort and hence requiring a different media strategy? But secondly, once in market, there are always, more often than not, there are always little things we can do with our communications to improve and optimize their impact. And the question is always, is it worth it? What it will cost me to make those changes, will I get the right payback? And the decision support tool that we used with Optus and various other clients allows us to do that in a really powerful, no-nonsense, straightforward way. So I've got a bit of a mock-up just to show you of how that works. So, as an illustration, quality, price, and emotion. What's our perception? What's our score in the market? And if we make changes to the ad and the ad can improve on these metrics, what will happen to our scores and with our commercial and brand and commercial outcomes? So very simply, we work with our clients also to collect some financial information. And this is not as hard as it seems, actually. It's normally very readily available. What this allows us to do is, based on the ad, what drives choice, what we know it's going to cost to both make and adjust ads, we can come to very simple decision criteria. Do we accept or do we reject these optimization approaches? Will it give us bang for our buck? Because ultimately, what we want to do, again, is drive the brand. So this final image here is what we call a value map. We want to be in the bottom right shaded area because this is the share gaining area. So we're always looking to make sure that the communications that we have in market are taking us on that in the direction that we need to based on our strategy. And this was, again, a core part of the work we did as part of the Optus program to help Michael, Mel and team make decisions about what they were going to be doing with their communications. So again, very briefly, these are the 4 things I've touched on today. And the final thought I wanted to leave everyone with is, even though I'm talking about advertising, it's not just an ad. It's a critical expression and amplification of the brand strategy. Well, thank you very much. We have 8 minutes left, 7 minutes left, I believe, and I'm going to jump to some Q&A, if that's okay. Thanks, Brittany. Okay, so just give me a few seconds while I just take a look at what the questions. So the first one that comes up is around brand linkage with Optus. So I'm going to address this question. So one of the conversations we have with many of our clients, including Optus, is around the 2 pillars of brand linkage. On the one hand, we have brand assets, brand cues. If you think about, and we call this branding. So if you think about when you brand a cow, you mark the cow as owning to a certain farmer, and assets and cues do the same thing. They brand the ad as a client's ad. So things like logo, color, music, sonic things, casting, celebrities, all these things act as cues. They act as assets for the brand, which lend themselves to someone knowing this ad is for Optus. The other pillar, however, is around the connection of the brand to the narrative, to the creative. And this is particularly relevant when it comes to video advertising. So what's the role of the brand in the story? And by this, we don't mean, I guess, a forced, a forced kind of physical presence in the ad, but it's almost a way of, can you describe the ad without mentioning the brand? If you can describe the ad without mentioning the brand may not be linked to the story. So again, with Optus and with many of our clients, we often have conversations around brand linkage and improving brand linkage through a combination of branding, that's the assets, and linkage, which is the role or connection to the story. Thank you for the question. So I'm just reading the questions, my apologies. So there's one question here around the decision support tool and rejecting any executions. So I probably won't go into specifics for the Optus situation, but certainly when it comes to the decision support tool, it's very common with our clients that really strong recommendations are made not to proceed with certain executions that won't be making a contribution to the brand or the business outcome. Sometimes it's very clear that an ad shouldn't proceed, and we would make that absolutely make that recommendation. Other times, what we often find is that there's a role for the ad or execution in a more targeted way. So, for example, it might be resonate really strongly with a particular demographic, in which case it allows our clients to adapt a more targeted media plan. That's very common with our decision support tool to come to those kinds of decisions. So targeting as well as outright recommendations not to proceed both occur. And the really powerful thing, I guess, about the decision support tool is that it gives a very, very clear line in the sand if these things are commercially viable, and sunk costs are sunk costs. If it's not going to pay for itself and help the brand, we shouldn't proceed with that. So that's a really strong tool that we use to help us make those decisions. Thank you for the question. Just looking at other questions. Yeah, there's a question here, a really nice one about the brief and selecting an agency. And I guess I'll just speak to this a little bit, just because it really came out really strongly in the session preceding this one with Michael Sinclair was talking about brief and briefing and the process of briefing. So probably one of the key pitfalls we see in a lot of advertising research is the baton change from strategy to brief to agency, that process. And we see all kinds of things. We see badly written briefs where there's no insight in there. We also see situations where the brief has been done very well, but for various reasons is ignored by the agency, and a different direction is taken for various reasons. So this is a key pivotal point in the entire journey. And at Forethought, we spend a lot of time, not just with the client, but with the agency. We like to spend a lot of time with the agency, as we did with Optus, working together to ensure comprehension and comfort. I think is a good word. Comfort with the research findings. We see ourselves not as policemen policing a particular way of doing things, but as coaches in that process. So in addition to obviously understanding research or findings around what to say, the brand strategy, in this particular program with Optus, we did spend quite a lot of time with Optus and Special Group around the two topics I mentioned, price brand and emotion. At Forethought, we don't just do research, of course, we do a lot of advisory, and part of this program included advising on scripts before they went to storyboard production. So as I'm sure we all know, the process of making an ad is very expensive. The timelines can be incredibly stressful and difficult sometimes. So we want to be part of that process and help our clients and their agencies as much as possible as coaches, holding up the research, holding up the mirror to that, and helping provide comfort and confidence in those findings and in the expression of the two things, such as price brand and emotion, which can be new ways of approaching these topics for many clients. It's worthwhile. My apologies, I'm going to keep talking, but the session ends in 20 seconds, I can see, and I know I'm going to get cut off immediately, as it so happens. But if I didn't answer the question, my apologies. Please feel free to reach out. I would love to answer the remaining questions. And the final thing, remember, it's not just an ad, it's an expression and amplification of the entire strategy. Thank you so much for joining.